This is part 2, episode 121. After taking a deep breath to calm himself, Hu Yuhao looked at the table and said, "This is my plan. Just like I mentioned yesterday, we'll carry out our surveillance mission at a high altitude. In terms of position, I choose this." As he spoke, Hu Yuhao lifted his right hand, and a streak of golden light shot from his fingertip, pointing towards a spot on the table. After seeing the position that Hu Yuhao had singled out, the White Tiger Duke and Princess Jojo were astonished. Both of them lifted their heads and looked sharply at Hu Yuhao. Hu Yuhao was pointing to the highest mountain peak of the Mingdo mountain range. More importantly, it was at that spot where the light of the death god was first unleashed. Princess Jojo hesitated. "Yuhao, the higher the mountain peak, the more dangerous it'll be for you. There are bound to be surveillance soul tools there. Why don't we change the position?" Hu Yuhao shook his head and replied, "The safest place is the most dangerous place. Naturally, they'll know that it's the safest spot. This is why they might not put all their attention on it. I hope that the Empire will coordinate with me and ambush them from this and that side." As he said, he pointed to two spots at opposite ends of the Mingdo mountain range. "Wait a minute, Yuhao," the White Tiger Duke suddenly said. He lifted his head and looked at Hu Yuhao with a deep look in his eyes. He said, "Honestly, this spot that you just pointed out is actually where we would like to surveil the most. However, I can't let you go there." His contradictory words left Hu Yuhao feeling warm and comforted. Compared to Princess Jojo, it seemed he was more compassionate. "Why?" Shu Sansha asked doubtfully. The White Tiger Duke took a look at Princess Jojo, who was red with embarrassment right now. Dai Hao lifted his right hand and pointed at the highest peak. It was at this place that 2,000 soul masters, who were at least soul sages, were all killed, causing us to suffer heavy losses. "I can't let Yuhao take this risk." "What?" After hearing his words, everyone from Shrek immediately understood. They had heard about the light of the death god before. They didn't expect the death god, which was close to a class 10 soul tool, to be located there. Dai Hao sighed and said, "I'm sure all of you could guess." "That's right, that's where the death god of the Sun Moon Empire is located. That light of the death god was a tragic experience for us. I'm sure you can understand how limited our information on the death god is. Furthermore, it's located at the highest mountain peak. That is why I can't let you go, Yuhao." Shu Sansha sighed and said, "You indeed can't go close to that soul tool. Yuhao, this spot that you've chosen is the most dangerous." "I know," Hu Yuhao replied calmly. "You know." At this moment, everyone focused their attention on him. Hu Yuhao nodded and said, "I know. I'm also a soul engineer. If I owned a powerful soul tool like the death god, I'd definitely place it on the highest peak. If I don't remember wrongly, the effective range of the death god is 5,000 meters. To cross the Mingdo mountain range, one naturally has to climb mountains. The death god can cover the sky and ground at the same time. It's at a spot that fully taps into its destructive power. That is why I expected the death god to be on this mountain peak when I chose it. However, the most dangerous place is also the safest place. No matter how intelligent the soul engineers from the Sun Moon Empire are, they wouldn't expect our target to be the death god. This soul tool is our greatest threat. If we can find out more information about it, it might make it easier for us to fight the Sun Moon Empire." Dai Hao furrowed his brow and said, "No, it's too dangerous. If something happens to you, how can I account to Shrek Academy? Your courage is commendable, but I can't let you make such an irresponsible choice." Hu Yuhao softened when he saw the determined look in Dai Hao's eyes. With regards to the position of the death god, Dai Hao didn't conceal anything. If he considered the benefit to the Empire, he could most certainly allow Hu Yuhao to carry out the surveillance. If he succeeded, the Star Luo Empire would benefit greatly. However, he didn't do so. Instead, he revealed everything. No wonder his subordinates were so loyal to him. The White Tiger Duke was very influential in the military. It would be great if he wasn't Hu Yuhao's father. If that were the case, Hu Yuhao might actually sacrifice everything to help him. Seeing Hu Yuhao's dazed look, Dai Hao continued saying, choose another spot. We'll continue to coordinate with you. Even if you want to survey the position where the death god is, we must try it from other spots first. We have to ensure that you'll be safe before we plan anything else. Hu Yuhao was silent for a moment before saying, White Tiger Duke, I'm really confident. It's best if we try it for our first time, because it's the most sudden. There are bound to be many soul tools around the death god. However, they are limited in their range. Among them, the few soul tools that can detect me are only effective at short range. Also, you're already aware how good my detection abilities are. If it's unidirectional, I can inspect things from up to 7 kilometers away. This means that I don't even have to enter the effective range of the light of the death god to survey it. As for how much I can find out, it'll depend on my luck. The White Tiger Duke was awed when he heard Hu Yuhao mentioning a range of 7 kilometers. As a titled Doluo, he was definitely aware of how important it was to have strong spiritual power. It was increasingly difficult to advance further once one became a titled Doluo. There were two very important barriers to overcome along the way. First, the body of the titled Doluo had to be able to withstand ever more soul power. Second, the titled Doluo had to have sufficient spiritual power to control and summon his enhanced soul power. Both were necessary. A titled Doluo could only reach the next tier if both factors went hand in hand. The difference between every tier, after becoming a titled Doluo, was extremely great. Hu Yuhao said that he could survey up to 7,000 meters in one direction. It was Dai Hao's first time hearing of such immense spiritual power. Among all the titled Doluo that he knew, he didn't know anyone who was that strong. Having such strong spiritual power was perfect for surveillance purposes. Even with the Sun Moon Empire's surveillance soul tools, they shouldn't be able to detect him from such a distance. Hu Yuhao was just like a Class 9 soul tool. Xu Jiujiu was very excited, and looked at Dai Hao. Marshal. Her intention was immediately understood. To the Star Luo Empire, inspecting the death god was too important. Dai Hao took in a deep breath and looked at Hu Yuhao seriously before asking, if you really want to survey the death god, how do you want us to support you? Hu Yuhao replied, I need you to feign an attack to draw the Sun Moon Empire's attention, and create an opportunity for me. At the same time, I need a titled Doluo who is adept at flying to send me high into the sky, the higher the better. 5,000 meters is the minimum. If greater heights are possible, I hope you can send me even higher up. That would be even safer. The White Tiger Duke nodded slightly and said, Yuhao, let me ask you one more time. Are you confident? Even if you don't succeed, it's fine. I need to ensure your safety. Dai Hao was very impressed by Hu Yuhao's words. Right now, the Northwestern Field Army was lacking in surveillance. Hu Yuhao's arrival would greatly help them in this aspect. If he wasn't boasting, the Star Luo Empire would be greatly helped in this war. Hu Yuhao nodded and said, there are no absolutes in this world, and everyone only has one life. I'll naturally do my best to guarantee my own safety. I'm 80% confident that I'll come through unscathed. But I'm only 20 to 30% confident of clearly surveilling the death god. After all, it's the #1 soul tool in the Sun Moon Empire. I'm sure there are many restrictions about it. Even if my spiritual power can engulf it, I'm not sure that I'll be able to find out anything about it. The White Tiger Duke nodded slightly. All right, Yuhao, I'll count on you, then. As long as you can return safely, I'll count it as a major merit. If you can find out what's going on with the death god, I'll definitely guarantee that you'll become a viscount and commander of your own legion. Xu Jiujiu was stunned when she heard his words. She understood the White Tiger Duke very well. It was extremely difficult to gain a promotion under him. However, if one managed to do so, it was bound to be very good. There weren't any shortcuts, however. One had to earn his promotion through his own merits. Dai Hao's offer to make Hu Yuhao a legion commander was unprecedented, and it even completely overshadowed his offer to make him a viscount. After all, given Hu Yuhao's cultivation and background as a student from Shrek Academy, being a viscount was nothing to him if he was willing to join the Star Luo Empire. All right. Hui Yuhao agreed. The White Tiger Duke pointed at the table and started to explain the Northwestern Field Army's judgment of the Mingdo mountain range. At the same time, he discussed his plan with Hui Yuhao. According to the White Tiger Duke, this reconnaissance mission was extremely important, and they couldn't rush things. They had to find a dark night, and the wind had to be strong. If the moon was too bright and visibility was clear, Hui Yuhao's safety would be compromised. However, he was surprised that Hui Yuhao's opinion was in complete contrast to his. Hui Yuhao wanted to find a day where the visibility was high to carry out his surveillance. His reason was very simple: he was able to conceal himself in the air with his imitation, and couldn't be detected by the naked eye. When the weather was good, his enemies would be able to see everything in the sky when they lifted their heads. It was easier for them to be careless. They planned the mission for an entire morning. It was lunchtime before they agreed that they were done. As he walked out of the tent, Hui Yuhao lifted his head to look at the sky. The sky was completely clear, and there weren't any clouds. The clear sky was like a huge sapphire. The blinding sunlight filled the world with the aura of light. The weather was very good. A slight smile appeared at the edge of Hui Yuhao's lips. He turned around and walked towards his tent. After he returned, he regrouped his thoughts there for a moment before leaving for lunch. Tang Wutong walked out from her tent behind Hui Yuhao. She managed to get a look at his side profile as he peered into the sky. When sunlight fell on his slightly pale face, the slight smile on his face left Tang Wutong a little weirded out. Why is there this sense of desperation that I can feel from his smile? Don't tell me that is suicidal. After returning his own tent, Hui Yuhao washed his face to refresh himself. Tang Wutong didn't see it wrong. His mental state was a little weird. Ever since he had discovered that Tang Wutong's soul power couldn't fuse with his, he had felt very mournful. The Doluo continent is so huge. If Donga has already forgotten me, how will I be able to find her? Tang Wutong's not Donga. So where is she? Don't tell me that Donga's already. Due to these confusing and complicated thoughts, he felt a little empty. He had been through too many things over the past year. Ever since he had gone to the setting sun forest to find the yearning heartbroken grass for Wang Donga, he had never completely spent time with her. After that, Wang Chua sacrificed herself, and Wang Donga fell into a coma. He entered a mental state of near desolation after that. If not for the fact that he was extremely mentally resilient, he would have broken down already. He had numbed himself by keeping himself busy. From the beast wave to the establishment of the spirit pagoda to his recognition of Dai Luoli, he tried to stop himself from thinking about Wang Donga and Wang Chua. He had gotten through each day because of that. However, Tang Wutong's appearance changed everything. Her appearance had rekindled his hope. However, this hope was extinguished one last time, and he was greatly devastated once again. The impact on him was hard to imagine. His exterior calm was actually a reflection of his deep inner depression. It was the scariest when one lost all hope. It was highly likely that Hui Yuhao's current mental state was the reason why he was adamant on surveying the death god. During the meeting today, there was one point that he had never mentioned. The death god was the strongest soul tool that the Sun Moon Empire had. At the same time, it was controlled by the strongest soul engineer in the Sun Moon Empire, the death god Doluo. No one knew how great the death god Doluo's abilities were. Few people knew what he looked like. Under such a situation, Hui Yuhao was at great risk trying to carry out this reconnaissance mission. However, he didn't really care anymore. He even thought that it might be a form of relief if he died on this mission. Dai Luoli knew his true identity. If he died, Dai Luoli would surely tell the White Tiger Duke his true identity. When that happened, would Dai Hao be heartbroken? If he was, it would be sort of a revenge for Dai Hao. He had sent his own son to the battlefield of no return. It was actually frustrating to think about that. As for Wang Donga, even if she was still alive, she had already forgotten him. Perhaps his death would be good for her. Her family didn't tell her anything about him, even though she had regained consciousness. This must mean that they were unhappy with him. Perhaps his death would signal a new beginning for her. When someone was resigned to fate, many of their thoughts would deviate from the norm. Hu Yuhao was exactly like that right now. Regarding the mission, he was already prepared for the worst. Lunch was very peaceful. No one could tell the difference. Hu Yuhao was even chatting and laughing with his fellow comrades. After lunch, Shusansha asked Hu Yuhao, are you going to go tonight? Hu Yuhao nodded and said, it's better to go early. At least the matter will be settled sooner. Shusansha furrowed his brow and said, what do you mean by settled? That sounds bad. Yuhao, you must be careful. We'll coordinate with you from the sky and ground today. Don't engage in any fights, no matter what you find. Come back immediately after scanning the area once. All right. Hu Yuhao acknowledged his words readily. Tang Wutong kept on glancing at him from the side. For some reason, she felt very tense no matter what Hu Yuhao said. She had never experienced such a feeling before. This feeling became even more acute when she looked at his expression when he smiled. Surely there isn't something wrong with him, right? Why am I so concerned about his safety? Just because we're in the same boat. Tang Wutong didn't understand why he was in such a state either. However, she had a premonition that tonight's mission wouldn't proceed that smoothly. Perhaps he might really meet with danger. Let me liaise with him in the sky tonight, Tang Wutong suddenly said. Oh? Hu Yuhao was a little stunned as he lifted his head to look at Tang Wutong. All he saw was the slightly troubled look on her face. Tang Wutong was the most adept at flying among those from the academy here. Not only was her martial soul adept at flying, but she was even a soul sage. Yi Gai was the next best. Yi Gai's holy martial soul could unleash angelic wings and fly freely in the air. However, the light from her martial soul was too strong and would be too obvious in the night sky. Thus, she could only use flying-type soul tools. Shusansha nodded and said, that's a great idea. Let's all take action tonight then. Hu Yuhao thought for a moment before saying, all right, let me make a plan then. We cannot be reckless. Tang Wutong and Yi Gai were responsible for liaising with Hu Yuhao from the air, while Shusansha and the rest would work with him from the ground. After all, Shusanshi's mysterious underworld displacement made it much easier for him to liaise with Hu Yuhao. After the enhancements he received from the Golden Tortoise, his mysterious underworld displacement could work at a much greater distance. Hu Yuhao immediately returned to his own tent to meditate, after he finished planning, restoring himself to his peak condition. The others did the same. During his meditation, time passed very quickly. When he awoke, the sky had already turned dark. The mysterious heaven technique circulated in his body, and his soul power surged strongly. His chi was also circulating strongly in his body. Under his control, his soul power kept on transforming. At times, it would fuse completely with his spiritual power. At other times, it would turn into pure ultimate ice, and his body temperature fell frighteningly. The two martial souls that he possessed were interchanging continuously. After an afternoon of meditation, Hu Yuhao's mental state was much better. A trace of purple flashed across his eyes, and he revealed a lost look. It seems like I haven't lived for myself in this life. I cultivate to seek revenge. I seek improvement, so that Brother Skydream and the rest can survive. But what about myself? I don't seem to have anything now. My mom has passed away, there's no news of Donga, and Chua sacrificed herself. A bitter smile appeared on his face. He shut his eyes and let this bitterness fade away. Suddenly, he stood up and walked out of his tent. The moment he walked out, he calmed himself and became abnormally composed. He had entered another state entirely. The White Tiger Duke had already gathered his men in the commander's tent. The officers of all 10 Soul Engineer Legions, apart from the 2 who had gone to reinforce the Heavenly Soul Empire, were all in the tent. A series of orders were passed down. Even if they were attacking, they had to do it properly. The White Tiger Duke's instructions were not to attack blindly. Rather, he commanded them to attack in tandem. They were divided into two different groups, and no ordinary soldiers were involved. This operation would be carried out entirely by the Soul Engineer Legions. The White Tiger Duke's instructions were for the Soul Engineer Legions were divided into two different routes, to dampen the threat of the Death God. They would attack the opposite ends of the Ming-Do mountain range. The White Tiger Duke's instructions had already been completely conveyed when Hu Yuhao came into the tent. After entering the tent, the White Tiger Duke and Hu Yuhao looked at each other. The White Tiger Duke nodded. Hu Yuhao appeared very composed, and wasn't flinching at all. Is he really only 20 years old? It's really rare for someone to remain so calm, even with such great responsibility on his shoulders. The White Tiger Duke nodded at Hu Yuhao to acknowledge him, just as he was in awe. Hu Yuhao also nodded to signal that he was ready. We'll follow the plan and move out, the White Tiger Duke shouted, and the mission started. All the officers of the Soul Engineer Legions immediately moved out and deployed their troops. Dai Luoli walked over in front of Hu Yuhao, and lifted his right hand before pressing it down on Hu Yuhao's shoulder. He said, "How are you? Yuhao, are you ready?" Hu Yuhao nodded slightly. "I'm ready." Dai Hao took in a deep breath and said, "We're about to begin over here. We'll be setting off in 15 minutes. We?" Hu Yuhao was a little doubtful as he looked at Dai Hao. Dai Hao nodded, "Yes, it's us. Even though my cultivation isn't the best in the military, I'll personally send you into the air in order to keep things confidential. Don't worry. I have a Class 7 flying type soul tool to help me. It should be fine for me to send you 5,000 meters into the air. However, I'm a marshal of 3 armies. After I send you into the sky, I'll need to return to lead my troops. I'll command the Soul Engineer Legions to attack for around an hour. You must complete your mission within this time frame. It's still the same advice, safety first. As long as you can come back safely, you've done your part. All right." After Hu Yuhao agreed, he quietly walked to a seat nearby and sat down, waiting for the time to come. The White Tiger walked out of the tent and watched as the Soul Engineer Legions were deployed. A playful smile appeared at the side of Hu Yuhao's lips. "Send me personally into the sky. That's not a bad idea. If that's the case, the effect will be much better than expected. Whether it's life or death, tonight's plan seems to have become more perfect." Tang Wutong kept on watching Hu Yuhao, and managed to catch a glimpse of his smile. When she saw his smile, her heart shuddered. What is this fellow thinking about? How can he still smile at such a time? His smile is even so. 15 minutes was soon up. Dai Luoli rushed in from outside. "Everyone, the marshal has instructed you to get ready." Everyone from Shrek Academy stood up and walked out of the tent. Dai Luoli intentionally delayed himself and waited for Hu Yuhao before walking out of the tent with him. He whispered, "Elder brother, what are you doing? What are you going to do tonight?" Hu Yuhao felt warm when he heard Dai Luoli calling him elder brother. He patted his shoulder and replied, "Nothing. Don't worry, everything will be fine." Dai Luoli twisted his lips. "Elder brother, don't get into any danger. I still hope that you'll come back and continue to guide me along. There have been too many things happening over these past few days. I didn't have the time to look for you. When you return, I'll find you, and you can continue to teach me. After that, you must also tell me why you left so suddenly that day. After you left, you don't know how anxious I was. I still thought that the Sun Moon Empire." Hu Yuhao chortled and replied, "Why do you have no confidence in me at all?" Dai Luoli replied, "It's not that. It's just that our enemies are too strong." Hu Yuhao replied, "Luoli, remember something. There's nothing impossible in this world." Dai Luoli was stunned for a moment, before nodding firmly. He had learned many things about Hu Yuhao from Shu Jiujiu and Dai Yueheng over the past few days. Yes. There was nothing impossible in this world. His elder brother was a great testament to that statement. When his elder brother only had 2 rings, he had competed in the Continental Advanced Soul Master Academy Soul Dueling Tournament with his seniors from the inner courtyard. He even turned the tables at the last minute, and preserved the glory of Shrek Academy. Even though Dai Yueheng was already a Soul Emperor back then, he couldn't help but compliment Hui Yuhao when he talked about him. That was 6 years ago. Hui Yuhao was a 2-ringed Soul Master 6 years ago, while Dai Yueheng was a 6-ringed Soul Emperor. Now, 6 years later, Dai Yueheng was already a Soul Sage. However, Hui Yuhao was also a 7-ringed Soul Sage. He even possessed twin martial souls. Dai Yueheng even told Dai Luoli that Hui Yuhao was the future master of the Sea Gods Pavilion. Even though Dai Luoli didn't feel close to Dai Yueheng and Dai Huabin, he still respected both of his elder brothers. He was jealous that they could enter Shrek Academy to learn. However, their talents seemed to pale in comparison to Hui Yuhao. His 3 elder brothers were likely to be some of the most elite soul masters on the continent in the future. Dai Luoli couldn't help but respect Hui Yuhao more after learning about all his miracles. The sky had turned completely dark by now. The White Tiger Duke descended from the sky. Evidently, he had just come down from the watchtower, where he had looked on as the troops were deployed. Hui Yuhao received him, and the White Tiger Duke said, "Our men are already on the move. Yuhao, are you ready?" Hui Yuhao nodded slightly and replied, "Anytime." The White Tiger Duke nodded and replied, "All right. We'll take action immediately then." As he spoke, he retrieved a flying-type soul tool from his storage-type soul tool and put it on. As a titled Doluo, it was still much more comfortable for him to use a flying-type soul tool, even though he was able to fly freely in the air. It was also easier for him to help Hui Yuhao into the air with the help of a soul tool. Hui Yuhao also started to get ready, and put on his own flying-type soul tool. "Let's go." The White Tiger Duke stood behind Hui Yuhao, grabbing him below his arms. His soul power surged, and the 2 of them rose into the air. They ascended in a straight line into the sky. Hui Yuhao's gaze was fixated on a specific position on the ground. At this moment, his gaze was gentle, indistinct, and carried a sense of yearning. It felt as if he wanted to imprint everything that he was seeing into his head. The look in Tang Wutong's eyes was equally indistinct. She had never seen a man's gaze so deep and emotional before. Within all the emotions he was experiencing, there seemed to be one of desolation. Something isn't right. It is unlikely that he has an 80% chance of survival. It might not even be 50%. At this moment, Tang Wutong finally understood everything. However, the White Tiger Duke was already high up in the air with Hui Yuhao. In such a short span of time, they managed to reach more than 1,000 meters into the air as they raced skywards. 8 Soul Engineer Legions were deployed at the same time. Even though they were only there to distract their enemies, almost all of the Soul Masters of the Star Luo Empire had been deployed. At such a time, the mission had to be carried out. This fool. Tang Wutong furrowed her brow. Even though she didn't want to admit it, she was clearly aware that it was highly likely that Hui Yuhao had persisted in carrying out his surveillance of the Death God, because of what had happened last night. Is it really possible for someone to forego his life, because of a romantic relationship? This fellow is really a fool. Tang Wutong clenched her fists tightly. She felt breathless, as if some special power were controlling her innermost feelings. As Dai Hao unleashed his strength, everything below started to become a blur. Hui Yuhao also finally lifted his head. He stopped looking at Tang Wutong, who had become indistinct. Even though she's not Donga, she still looks very similar to Donga. Tonight, I'll treat her as Donga, since I might not be able to survive this ordeal. A slight smile appeared on Hui Yuhao's face. As he sensed the low surrounding temperature, his soul power started to circulate. As the aura of ultimate ice filled his body, the external cold wasn't able to affect him at all. 1,000 meters, 2,000 meters, 3,000 meters. After rising 3,000 meters into the air, the external temperature dropped significantly. Even the White Tiger Duke was slowing down as he continued to climb. Yuhao, how are you feeling? If you aren't feeling comfortable, please tell me. We can stop. I'm fine. Please continue, Hu Yuhao replied calmly. Dai Hao furrowed his brow. From Hu Yuhao's tone of voice, he could evidently sense indifference and coldness. What's going on with him? Don't tell me he's experiencing emotional changes right now. Glancing down from the sky, it was clear that countless Soul Masters were already flying towards the Mingdo mountain range from the Northwestern Field Army's military base. All those who were involved were wearing flying-type Soul tools. Even though the operation was jointly carried out by 8 Soul Engineer Legions, there were only 2,000+ Soul Masters involved. They were mainly 4-ringed and 5-ringed Soul Masters, and were widely scattered. From afar, they were subtly creeping their way towards the Mingdo mountain range. There were a few titled Doluo among these 4-ringed and 5-ringed Soul Masters. They were the main commanders of this operation. Even though they weren't really attacking, they still had to make their enemies feel threatened. At the same time, they had to try to minimize their losses. Under such a situation, the titled Doluo were the best candidates to ensure a smooth flow of the operation. Furthermore, they weren't attacking close to the main peak. The Death God couldn't reach them. Of course, there were still other terrifying soul tools that the Sun Moon Empire possessed, hidden in the mountains. Without accurate intelligence, it wasn't feasible to venture deeper. The Sun Moon Empire was bullying the Star Luo Empire in terms of its lack of surveillance ability. It was difficult to tell how many soul tools they had planted in the Mingdo mountain range. After all, the Star Luo Empire didn't have any credible intelligence. At 4,000 meters, the temperature had already fallen far below zero, and it was falling even further. Every few hundred meters up, the temperature dropped a further 5 to 6 degrees. After 5,000 meters, the temperature was below -100 degrees Celsius. Literally no biological organism would be able to survive at such a height. It was also why high-altitude aerial surveillance soul tools weren't able to develop further. The White Tiger Duke was draining a lot of his soul power. As Hu Yuhao was close to the White Tiger Duke's body, he could clearly sense the explosive strength and immense soul power from him. These were soul power undulations from a titled Doluo. They were strong and consolidated. If his martial soul hadn't followed his mother's spirit eyes, he might have had a white tiger, too. In addition, his destiny might have been completely different. It was his father. This was his father behind him. Naturally, Dai Hao didn't know about Hu Yuhao's complicated emotional changes as he rose into the sky. He only sensed a layer of soul power that seemed to be there, and yet seemed not there in Hu Yuhao. The circulation of qi in his body was also very gentle. Under such low temperatures, Hu Yuhao was less drained than him. No wonder he's a top student, and someone who possesses ultimate ice. 4 to 500 meters. Dai Hao also found it a little strenuous right now. He was carrying someone, and had to keep climbing. At the same time, he had to resist the low temperature and the thinning air. There was also a lack of elemental power at such high altitudes. It was practically impossible for a soul master to replenish himself. Even if the milk bottle technique was advanced, it wasn't very helpful for a titled Doluo at his level. The best milk bottle was only Class 7. Currently, there wasn't a Class 8 milk bottle developed for a titled Doluo to use. The soul power requirements for a Class 8 milk bottle were simply too high. No material was currently able to support these requirements, leaving Class 7 the limit. Furthermore, a titled Doluo could recover faster by absorbing origin energy than by using a Class 7 milk bottle, so a true titled Doluo couldn't use a milk bottle to replenish himself. Milk bottles were useless to them. They were at 4,800 meters now. Dai Hao's flying speed was already very slow. At such an altitude, it was actually much brighter than it was on the ground. The stars were blinding amid such thin air. Spots of starlight filled the sky, and fell on Dai Hao and Hu Yuhao. There weren't any signs of any living organisms around them. At such a low temperature and amid such thin air, no one or thing could possibly survive. Between 4,800 meters and 4,900 meters, Dai Hao used 1 minute to ascend. In addition, his speed kept slowing down. Hey! Hu Yuhao heard a shout behind him. Following that, he felt his body lighten. Dai Hao's hands had disappeared, and a strong burst of soul power came from behind him. Hu Hao subconsciously lowered his head, and saw that the white tiger Duke had turned into a huge white tiger. He had lifted Hu Hao up and let him sit on him. As he sat on the huge white tiger's back, Dai Hao rose faster and faster. In just a few breaths, he managed to surge beyond 5,000 meters, and was surging even further. Martial Soul True Body, White Tiger. The White Tiger Vajra transformation, and White Tiger's Devil God transformation were both unleashed. Right now, the White Tiger Duke had increased his cultivation to his strongest state to send Hu Hao further up into the air. Someone else was already taking such a great risk. How could he possibly not give his all? However, Dai Hao didn't know that Hu Hao was very conflicted right now. When he was young, Hu Hao had lived in the Duke's mansion with his mother and the servants. The White Tiger Duke's servants also had kids, and he would always watch as they were carried by their fathers, looking very blissful. When that happened, he would always ask his mother where his father was. When can I be carried by my father, just like them? Every time, his mother would always tell him that it would happen in the future, and that his father was very busy. He had waited for 20 years, just like that. Hu Hao didn't expect to be carried by his father in this lifetime. He was already tearing up. No matter how much he hated Dai Hao, he now deeply understood that he was right to have saved Dai Hao twice. The quiet night sky was extremely chilly. However, there was only warmth coming from the White Tiger Duke's fur. I can finally be carried by my father. A mother's love was boundless. What about a father's love? A father's love was always deep. Perhaps a father wasn't very good at expressing himself, but there was no doubt that a father's love was comparable to a mother's love. A father ran around outside to support his family. Perhaps he might be less caring, but how would there be a warm family without a father supporting it? Part 2 end here.